Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston. We extend a heartfelt and inclusive invitation to join us in meaningful worship and service to the world. We greet all of you who are with us in this sanctuary this morning, as well as those of you who are joining us online. Today, I would like to encourage you to visit our website, firstuu.org, so that you can both learn more about our congregation and learn about our annual online silent auction. There you'll find many wonderful items that you can bid on and, in doing so, support First Houston. Because of the uptick in cases in the pandemic, we have temporarily suspended congregational singing, but we are delighted today to have our music director, Dr. Jolie Rock, and our accompanist, Chelsea D'Souza, presenting our hymns this morning. In honor of Malcolm X's Islamic faith, we begin our service not with a call to worship from me, but a traditional Muslim call to prayer. We hope that you will hear the call to prayer in the spirit that it is offered as a tribute to the faith of one of the 20th century's great religious leaders. So please sit back and center yourselves.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah wa Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar wa illahil hamd, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah wa Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar wa illahil hamd.
Celebremos compartiendo nuestras vidas, encendiendo esta luz. I want to leave my footprints on the sands of time. Know there was something that meant something that I left behind. When I leave this world, I'll leave no regrets. Leave something to remember so they won't forget I was here. I lived, I loved, I was here. I've done everything that I wanted, and it was more than I thought it would be. I will leave my mark so everyone will know I was here. I want to say I lived each day until I die, and know that I meant something in somebody's life. The hearts I have proved will be the proof that I leave, that I made a difference, and this world will see I was here. I lived, I loved, I was here. I've done everything that I wanted, and it was more than I thought it would be. I just want them to know that I gave my all, did my best, left someone some happiness, left this world a little better just because I was here. I was here. I lived, I loved, I was here. I did, I've done everything that I wanted, and it was more than I thought it would be. I will leave my mark so everyone will know I was here. I lived, I loved, I was here. I did, I've done everything that I wanted, and it was more than I thought it would be. I will leave my mark so everyone will know I was here. I was here.
Please join me in the spirit that some call prayer and others name meditation. Open yourself to the wonders and mysteries of the world. Open yourself to compassion and empathy. Take one breath. Take another. Center yourself. O Spirit of life, that some of us name God and others call the highest in human aspiration, or encounter in the beauty of humanity, the radiance of the earth, be with us this morning as we offer a simple prayer of peace. O Spirit of life, may this morning find those who have hardened their hearts in violence, softening them in love, those who pursue war, seeking peace in the farms and cities, those who proclaim the might of militaries, turning instead towards the path of diplomacy, those who uplift nationalism, racism, white supremacy, converting instead to the truth that each of us is but a part of the great family of all souls. Hearing these words, may each do what they can to build peace in their homes and hearths, and resolve to carry love, not violence or hatred, in their hearts. That it might be so, I invite the congregation to say, Amen. We pause now to lift up that which sits heavy and light upon our hearts. We lift up the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia, and indeed all the peoples of Europe and the world, and pray at this time that the foolishness of fearmongers and self-serving political leaders might be overcome, and that war and destruction might be averted. We pray for Joan Waddell, whose sister-in-law, Jean Waddell, died this last week due to cancer. I invite you now to say or bring to mind the names of those you wish to be held in the loving embrace of this community. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. We extend our empathy to all of the suffering and to all of the joy that we do not know or has not been named. And now let us pause in awe and wonder of the mystery and beauty that is life, for a time of silent meditation, reflection, or prayer. In the spirit of compassion, in the spirit of hope, we can go deeper in silence than words might take us.
my prayer. This is my prayer. May the sense of mystery guide us through our journey. This is my prayer. This is my prayer. This is my prayer.
Each week, our morning offering is shared with an organization that shares our Unitarian Universalist values and through which we may live out our principles in the world. This week, that organization is Project Row Houses, whose mission is to empower people and enrich communities through engagement, art, and direct action. Project Row Houses has worked with the Third Ward community since 1993. They remain dedicated to the culture and history in the Third Ward and work alongside residents to directly address changes that affect the community. Their programs cultivate independent change agents by creating sustainable opportunities for young mothers, small businesses, and artists who are encouraged to extend their practice outside of the studio into the social context. Those in our sanctuary will find the instructions for text giving in the order of service, and those watching the live stream will see the instructions on your screen. Our regular Sunday morning offering collection invites us to weave a tapestry of love and action. We ask you to give generously. An offering will now be gratefully received.
Please join with me to read the words to dedicate the offering found in your order of service. To the work of this church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these, our offerings.
Our first reading is Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like the moon and like suns, with the certainty of tides. Just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Here ends the first reading.
Our second reading this morning is from Eulogy for Malcolm X by Ozzie Davis. Many will ask what Harlem finds to honor in this stormy, controversial, young, bold captain, and we will smile. Many will say, turn away from this man, for he is not a man, but a demon, a monster, a subverter, an enemy of the black man. And we will smile. They will say that he is of hate, a fanatic, a racist, who can only bring evil to the cause for which you struggle. And we will answer them and say, did you ever talk to Brother Malcolm? Did you ever touch him or have him smile at you? Did you ever really listen to him? Did he ever do a mean thing? Was he ever associated with acts, with violence or any public disturbance? For if you did, you would know him. And if you knew him, you would know why we must honor him. Malcolm was our manhood, our living black manhood. This was his meaning to his people. And in honoring him, we honor the best in ourselves. Last year from Africa, he wrote these words to a friend. My journey, he says, is almost ended, and I have a much broader scope than when I started, which I will believe will add a new life and dimension to our struggle for freedom and honor and dignity in the States. Here ends the second reading.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises age and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Did you ever talk to Brother Malcolm? Did you ever touch him or have him smile at you? Did you ever really listen to him? I begin my sermon with these words from Ossie Davis for a simple reason. Tomorrow marks the 57th anniversary of the assassination of El Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, best known as Malcolm X. Malcolm's voice is missed. The lieutenant governor of our state is openly threatening academic freedom. Like many others in his political party, he does not care for critical race theory. Actually, he doesn't like the caricature of it that he's constructed. He reduces the theory to, in his words, the belief that if you're white, you're born a racist. Such a position is actually the opposite of what critical race theory argues. It revolves around the claim that race is a social construct, something that has been created through legislation and theological doctrine to further the economic and political interests of people, primarily men, with great economic and political power. Its proponents do not claim that if you are born white, you are racist. They understand that race, as it is envisioned today, that there is such a thing as black and such a thing as white, is something which came into being through the work of European theologians and colonial legislatures, and the United States Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court. They observe that in order to be a racist, in the words of the old Rodgers and Hammerstein song, you've got to be carefully taught. And that men like our lieutenant governor are the ones doing the teaching. Shortly before his death, Malcolm X passionately put forth a position similar to the one advocated by scholars of critical race theory. Victims of racism are created in the image of racists, he said. He sought to reframe the struggle for civil rights as a struggle for human rights. He came to believe that white supremacy was a problem for all humanity. He embraced, in the gendered language of the mid-20th century, brotherhood of all men, while warning, I don't believe in wasting brotherhood on anyone who doesn't want to practice it with me. In these times, when men like the lieutenant governor spew forth drivel and pass harmful laws in an effort to further what W.E. Du Bois once named the propaganda of history, Malcolm's voice is missing. Arguably, one of the most important political and religious figures of the 20th century, there's no federal holiday in his name. Though he once had a postage stamp, there's no monument for him on the National Mall. He's not even much honored in his hometown. I know this because Malcolm and I grew up in the same place. We're each from the Lansing, Michigan area. And here I should acknowledge the obvious. I'm a white man talking about a black man. And not just any black man, but the one who Davis named our own shining black prince. A person who in life and in death became a symbol for black liberation. So my whiteness is almost certainly one part of the reason why I did not learn about Malcolm. Even though we more than 40 years apart, we spent our childhoods on many of the same streets. Indeed, he is wholly absent from the early memories I have of the city we shared. When I was a kid, there was no high school, middle school, or elementary school named after him in his hometown. No statue of him sat at the city center or graced a park. The places he worked, the homes he lived, the schools he attended, all silent about the one-time presence of this great prophet and freedom fighter. The diner that I used to frequent as a teenager, the one down the street from the house my parents owned, is where Malcolm had one of his first jobs. Yet when I was 15, 16, 17, there was no plaque remarking that he had once worked there. No photograph of him gazed down upon my friends and I as we ate our ice cream sundaes or munched our French fries. Malcolm was missing from the Michigan of my youth. This past January, just after New Year, while visiting my parents, Sade and I decided to set out to see if that had changed. Under the guidance of Professor John Ernie Fleschner, students from Michigan State University had put together a website titled Malcolm's Lansing. It provides a tour of where he and his family lived, loved, and struggled for much of the first 2 decades of his life. Using Malcolm's Lansing, we compiled a list of a half a dozen important sites and, borrowing one of my parents' cars, set off on a short pilgrimage. Was Malcolm still missing in Michigan? What could we find of him? How might our encounter change us? You have gone on a similar pilgrimage? Pilgrimage is an ancient religious practice. It's not often one practiced by Unitarian Universalists, except for, of course, the occasional trip to Boston or Transylvania. But it is the experience of going on a journey in search of a holy place, person, or object. The pilgrim anticipates transformation along the way and upon reaching their destination. That transformation might be a deeper unity with the divine, a new form of insight, better self-knowledge, or even a new understanding of what it means to be human. The Muslim practice of the Hajj profoundly transformed Malcolm's life. The name he used at the end, El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz, was one that signified that he had fulfilled the religious duty to visit the Kaaba, the house of God in the city of Mecca. It changed his understanding of Islam and of religion. He began his shifts away from the teachings of the Nation of Islam and to Sunni Islam. It altered his politics, moving him from being a militant black nationalist to a revolutionary Pan-Africanist. I didn't anticipate a similar transformation on my pilgrimage, nor did I undergo one. But nonetheless, I found much to ponder and contemplate as we went on our search for Malcolm in Michigan. So come with me for a little of it, and maybe the journey might change you some too. We begin in the neighborhood across from the Lansing airport, at the site of Malcolm's first home in Michigan. The homes here are small and, by Houston standards, old. They date from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. A few we see now might have stood there when a very young Malcolm played in the yard with his siblings or walked the city streets with his father, Earl. Malcolm's dad, along with his mother Louise, were organizers with the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Founded by Marcus Garvey, the movement advocated for black cultural, economic, and spiritual power at a time when it was incredibly dangerous to be black in America. The Garveyites practiced self-defense against white violence. They put forth a message that only oppressed peoples can free themselves. This was not a popular message in the Lansing of the 1930s. It did not endear Earl or Lewis or their children to their white neighbors. Malcolm's family was burned out of their first Michigan house by white supremacists. When we arrived at the address at which he had lived and where his house had stood, we found another building in its place. There was nothing to commemorate what had happened there. Malcolm was missing. His family was missing. There was not a trace to be found. Our next stop took us to his family's second home site. They lived there only briefly. All we found was a parking lot. No home, no marker, just asphalt. Malcolm was missing there as well. At this point, feeling dispirited, we set out to the third place that we wanted to visit, the place where his third family home had been situated. According to Malcolm's Lansing, completed in 2015, there was a historical marker there honoring his time in Michigan. Driving 10 minutes or so through the gray of winter, we arrived at our destination only to find nothing. We learned that later, last year, someone had destroyed the marker in an act of vandalism. It had honored the last place he had lived with both of his parents. While his family was in that home, his father died, crushed to death by a streetcar. It's unclear exactly what happened. Some claim that Earl Little was pushed under the streetcar by white supremacists. Others believe that his death was accidental. Malcolm himself seemed to be uncertain about how his father died, sometimes describing Earl's death as being a victim of white violence, and other times calling it an accident. Whatever the case, when we visited the intersection of East Michigan Avenue and Detroit Street, the site where Malcolm's father died, we found no memorial for him there. There was only asphalt. The streetcar and its tracks long gone, despite the fact that some of Malcolm's daughters had visited it some years ago as part of their own pilgrimage in honor of their father and grandparents. I want to share the final two stops of our pilgrimage. The first brought forth the only real public, enduring recognition of Malcolm in Lansing. There's a street named after him. We actually found the spot where Malcolm X Street intersects with Martin Luther King Boulevard, and took some pictures there. The juxtaposition of the two might seem curious. They're often presented in the media as contrasting figures. The truth, as it often is different. At the end of their lives, their political beliefs were far closer than is commonly appreciated. As the great theologian James Cone wrote, near his end, Malcolm started to advocate hope and the participation of African Americans in the political process. And near his end, King found his dream was shattered, observed nightmares in American cities and on the battlefields of Vietnam, and began to talk like Malcolm. Our final stop should have been a celebration of the way in which Malcolm's hometown has come to honor him. We went to visit the Shabazz Public School Academy, featuring a sign with a red, black, and green Pan-African banner and a portrait of Malcolm. We hoped we would find an institution in the city devoted to furthering his legacy. Instead, we found the school permanently closed and a large banner reading "Court-Ordered Sale" nailed over the academy's placard. it seemed that Malcolm was destined to continue to be missing from Michigan. The closure of the Shabazz Public School Academy and the absence of Malcolm's historical marker are uncomfortable metaphors for the propaganda of history that people like Texas's lieutenant governor are waging under the guise of their assault on critical race theory. It might be better to call the school's demise and the marker's vandalism as symptoms of the assault rather than metaphors. Lieutenant Governor's project fundamentally is about the erasure of history and its replacement with something that furthers a political agenda centered on the maintenance of white power and white supremacy. Almost 90 years ago, W.E. Du Bois, one of Malcolm's heroes, described the efforts of such a project as an attempt to discredit human beings, put forth by those who would compromise truth in the past in order to make peace in the present and guide policy in the future. Those who would compromise truth. Here I would direct you to the fourth principle of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It states that our religious communion is committed to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Freedom of speech and a devotion to a search for the great truths of human existence are one of the organizing principles of Unitarian Universalism. Indeed, if there is a through line that connects our tradition over the centuries, it is precisely that. Our commitment to freedom of speech and the search for truth is so important that we actually encode it in our agreements between ministers and congregations. My own contract with First Houston has a clause that reads, "The church affirms that the developmental minister's freedom of speech in the pulpit and in the community will not be abridged in any way." We live in times when academic freedom and disciplines like history are under attack by those who would erase the knowledge of the past so that they might resurrect their own lost cause of Jim Crow. One of the things our congregation can offer each other and the larger community in such moments is a place where we can proclaim, debate, and search for the truth. It was such a search to which Malcolm devoted his life. In his autobiography, he wrote, "I've had enough of someone else's propaganda. I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. I'm for justice, no matter who it is for or against. I'm a human being first and foremost, and as such, I'm for whomever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole." It would be hard for me to provide a better interpretation of the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism, though of course Malcolm was not interpreting that principle. He was speaking from the perspective of a Muslim who, following his pilgrimage to Mecca, had come to understand that Islam embraced all of humanity. Grounded in this theology at the end of his life, he came to be devoted to the project of collective liberation for the entirety of the human family. Malcolm's vision was such, his importance to the project of freedom and liberation so profound, that he should not be missing from Michigan or anywhere else for that matter. His absence in his hometown is impoverishing. It furthers the propaganda of history. Counteracting that propaganda is one of the things that this congregation has, in our best moments, been devoted to. It's why we work in Freedmanstown, not just preserving Black history with the Yates Museum, but trying to support Black future with the Freedmanstown Association. It's why we celebrate the words of those like Malcolm's friend, the great poet Maya Angelou, who would tell the lieutenant governor and his allies, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise." It's why this pulpit has, for more than 100 years, been devoted to the search for truth and celebration of freedom. It's why I was reminded of the importance of that search on my own pilgrimage looking for Malcolm in Michigan. Perhaps I have reminded you of it as well. El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz certainly believed them central to the human and religious project. For that truth he lived. Devoted to the cause of freedom, he died. Did you ever talk to Brother Malcolm? Did you ever touch him or have him smile at you? Did you ever really listen to him? So that we might oppose the propaganda of history, hear the words of Malcolm X, and find the truth that leads to liberation, I invite the congregation to say, Amen.
Has anybody here seen my old friend Malcolm? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seemed the good die young, and I just looked around and he's gone. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going?
Please join me in the words found in your printed bulletin. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
As we leave this place, let us again lift up the words of Malcolm X. I've had enough of someone else's propaganda. I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. I'm for justice, no matter who is for or against it. I'm a human being first and foremost. And as such, I'm for whomever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole. Let us go forth devoted to the cause of truth and the cause of freedom. Go in peace, go in love, may our lives be a blessing. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be. Thank you so much for watching our service today. We're glad you're part of our online community, where we welcome people who are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, as well as gender identity and sexual orientation. There are many different ways you can get involved in our community. One you can do right now is by clicking like below or subscribing to our channel. If you're interested in joining our congregation, please email us at membership@firstgu.org. Thanks so much for joining us.